I'm not as bright today as I would like to be. I think I'm suffering from a little intestinal flu, so if I don't hang in there very long, I hope you'll forgive me. I want to thank you all for the wonderful birthday present you gave me, of just your presence, your company, your smiles, your love, and I very much appreciate it. It was a wonderful weekend. This weekend, we're celebrating Memorial Day, and the celebration is for all the soldiers that died in the war. And I would like to suggest that we pray not only for those patriotic Americans who died to protect America, but also quite the opposite of something I experienced when it was just after the war. And I went to a church in Boxford where my godfather lived, and it was an incredible service. Apart from saying nothing at all, he urged us to drink to forget. That was the subject. Drink to forget. What are you supposed to forget? Well, I can see forgetting the meanness, the hatred, although no, we were supposed to forget the dirty Japs and the horrible Nazis and this thing and that thing. And then, final insult, the wine that they usually give for communion was grape juice. But what I would like to say is that we should pray not for one side, but for all sides. Pray for humanity, that it can fall into such pits of rage and destruction as to keep the world constantly in turmoil. It's a rare thing, unfortunately. I don't suppose it has ever happened that the whole world has been at peace. Master said that after the final blow-up that we're coming toward, there will be peace for 200 years. People will be so fed up with fighting and destroying. But war is only one manifestation of the wish to do harm, which takes countless forms. The wish to hurt other people, the wish to strike back. So much of our culture, especially in the West, but I suppose it's taken other forms elsewhere, is based on competition. Somebody wrote an analysis of this mathematically and found that cooperation is a much better way to get ahead. Master used to say this too. He said that if you look upon other people as your friends, in a town of, let's say, 1,000 merchants, every merchant will have 999 friends. Isn't that a lot better than having 999 enemies? Competition is self-destructive. It's one of the basic lessons that cooperative communities are all about. To follow the saying of, I think it was Leo de Rocher who said that nice guys finish last. Well, in a way, it seems to work that way, but in the long run, it does not work that way. I was just recently reading a book that I was given called Sprezzatura on 50 Italians who have influenced the entire culture of the West and, in fact, the whole world. And I was reading a little bit about Machiavelli, and he, too, endorsed this idea that by being nice, you don't win. You've got to get yours. You've got to go out and grab it from other people. You have to suppress other people. And if you're a ruler, that means don't hesitate to torture, kill, do anything you can to keep people in line and doing what you want them to do. It's a dreadful philosophy, but the last and final point against it is that it really doesn't work. When you see people like Hitler, Napoleon, Mussolini, Cromwell, again and again, you see that they do have success for a certain length of time. But in the end, well, at Waterloo, they found, in the carriage of Napoleon, they found a copy of Il Principe, the Prince, by Machiavelli. Hitler kept it by his bedside. Mussolini recommended it until he realized that people would begin to get the idea of his secret of power, so then he had it banned. But again and again, you find that the people who hold to that theory, yes, they succeed for a while, partly just because other people, it just puts them in shock. They don't know what to do about it. And it takes them a while to rally. I remember when the war broke out and Japan invaded Pearl Harbor, it took this country quite a while to be able to get into production enough to strike back effectively. But it wasn't easy, and it isn't easy. When you're first attacked, you don't expect it. That, of course, is a worry nowadays, because with nuclear war, a war could be finished in a week. World war could be finished in a week. It's not a comfortable thought. We do have to be prepared, but we have to always remember that to strike back must be done without anger. Otherwise, you will carry that anger with you long after the noise is over. We have to learn to be strong in ourselves, and that means that we have to learn sometimes to defend our rights. Master said, don't be a doormat. But on the other hand, don't have ill will in your heart. There's a beautiful story about Mahatma Gandhi. It's told in Freedom at Midnight, a very interesting book. And there was this big sort of rage between the Muslims and the Hindus in Calcutta, because it was going to be, Bengal was to be divided. There was a lot of anger between the two sects. And at the height of that anger, it looked as if it could flare up into a real war. Mahatma Gandhi, against everybody's advice, went alone to Calcutta, took a house in the poorest district, surrounded by Muslims. It was a Muslim district. And they were angry with him at first, and they were pelting his house and everything. But bit by bit, the people became so completely won over, because he recognized them as his brothers and sisters. He didn't come to factionalize anybody. And whereas he was murdered finally by a Hindu who was furious at this forgiveness of their enemy, nonetheless, his memory lingers, and I think I at least have forgotten the name of that assassin, forgotten the name of the people he represented. Gandhi's spirit of nonviolence was admirable and not something the world can hope to practice right now, yet it's something that in our hearts we can. Gandhi wasn't completely realistic, mind you. Somebody said to him, well, supposing somebody goes into a village that you're living in and shoots everybody up, what would you do? Well, I think a sensible person would say that we'd contain that person in any way necessary. He might do it with nonviolence, but that doesn't mean not bonking him over the head. It doesn't mean not killing him if necessary, to protect the lives or save the lives of many other people. We live in a relative world. We can't change that fact. We have to deal with reality on its own level, whatever that level is. If you're going into a criminal area, you can't go there with sweetness and light. You've just got to be realistic. It's sort of like a story of Master when he went into, this was back at the time of all the Chicago gangsters and so on, and he was in Chicago, and he went out into a park there, and a policeman warned him, don't go in there. Even we don't dare go in there at night. And Master said, that's all right, I'm not worried. So he sat down on a park bench. And some big tough came up to him and said, give me a dime. Well, a dime meant something in those days. It doesn't mean that much today. In fact, I read a menu dated about 1910, a whole steak dinner, 10 cents, hard to believe. So you think you're making a lot more money, but in real terms, you're probably way behind. Anyway, the guy said, give me a dime. So Master reached in his pocket, gave him a dime. Give me a quarter. So he reached out and gave him a quarter. Give me 50 cents. So Master gave him 50 cents. Give me $1. Master decided he wasn't going to give him any peace. He just was there to watch the moon rise. So Master just stood up and said, get out! With so much power, the man just shook. And in terror, he dropped the money. He said, "I don't want your money." He ran for his life. And Master sat down and enjoyed the moonrise. And later, the policeman was still outside. He didn't dare come in. And the policeman said, "Well, what happened?" And Master said, "Oh, we had a little understanding." Well, you have to deal with people as they are, but that doesn't mean you have to feel that in your heart. It's your heart that has to be nonviolent. Gandhi, when he was asked that question, said, "Well, I would let him shoot me first." Beautiful answer, but totally unrealistic. Suppose the man had shot him and then shot his family and then gone and shot other people. You can't prevent it with that attitude. If only he was at stake. If he's out in the wilderness and this guy comes, well, fine, that's a good answer. But when you've got a lot of other people, you can't answer that way. You have to go to war. That's why the Bhagavad Gita, although the war of Kurukshetra is it's physically a battle in which many people were killed, yes. But it's much more than a physical battle. A real battle is inward. So why did they use that outward symbol? Not only because it's dramatic, but also because it does exist, and Krishna's advice to him was, you have to do your duty. Your duty is to fight in defense of your values, your kingdom, your country, and you can't win by not competing when you have to. But there must always be inwardly a feeling of kindness, of forgiveness, of non-rancor at least. That is what ahimsa or non-violence really means, not to want hurt to anybody. Now you may say, well, killing somebody is a supreme hurt. No, it isn't, not at all. You just come and go all the time. It's sort of a revolving door. Wishing death is something else. Suicide's even worse than murder, because that's the denial of life itself, whereas murder is just a denial of life in somebody else that doesn't touch you yet completely. But both of these they're wrong, but they aren't wrong in the cosmic sense, because God, really, Master, sometimes he used pretty graphic expressions. He told me God eats people. It was that he doesn't care whether you live or die, because he sees there's nothing but life. But for each of us, it seems difficult. You have to pull up stakes. All the things that you've built so carefully and done so carefully, suddenly they don't exist for you. And you come back as a squalling little baby again and don't know any of that. Have to go through it all over again. The thought of being a teenager again. No. But the thing is that what we need to do is have an attitude of kindness. When we have that, then interestingly enough, people really have a different attitude toward you. Usually, not everybody, but in the end you do win. Whether you win in the astral world for having lived right, or whether you win in this world, it doesn't really matter, because the battle goes on, the conflict goes on, the difficulties go on. And when Master made the statement that as long as there's one, I'll come back again and again, as long as there's one stray brother weeping by the wayside, I just find myself marveling, because it'll never happen. There are always going to be not one, but millions of stray brothers weeping by the wayside. As soon as this planet becomes perfect, it just is dissolved. A planet is dissolved for one of two reasons. One, because all its inhabitants are bad. The other, because all its inhabitants are good. It's like when the scriptures say God created the universe, he created people who knew him. And they just sat down and meditated and went into, submerged into him, and there was no universe left. So he tried it again and again. They just went, and so he thought, well, I've got to create delusion. This isn't a literally true story, but it shows why God needed to create this, or there wouldn't be this. There has to be in this world that kind of drama and so on. Just think if you read a book and the man, let's say, is born on the wrong side of the tracks, Well, let's say he's born first on the right side of the tracks. And he's born, as they say, with a silver spoon in his mouth. Everything goes well. He decides he wants to go to work, no problem. First place he goes to, he's hired. He soon rises in the company. He meets the boss's wife, falls in love with her. They get married. They have a beautiful... Huh?
Boss's daughter.
Son, sorry. Son. He meets the boss's daughter. And they get married. And they live in this beautiful suburban home. And everything goes right. And finally, with fanfare and trumpets, he dies. Well, you'd put the book down long before that ending. Oh, what a bore. But you get that same man, born on the wrong side of the tracks, has to fight his way through all sorts of problems and get educated even though he doesn't have any money, get a job although he doesn't stand a chance. Somehow the employer was looking the wrong way and decided to hire him or something. And so then finally, after all sorts of obstacles, he meets the boss's daughter. Got it right, I hope so. And he gets made the president of the company, and everything goes beautiful. What a bore. I mean, how exciting that would be and how boring the first would be. You need excitement. You wouldn't really put up with this planet very long, with this human life, if all went well. It's always that hope that this is going to work out somehow and that's going to work out somehow. You need a little tension. You need a little... I used to think, why doesn't Divine Mother, she wants these communities, why didn't she just give them to me? Nobody came forward to pay for it. Nobody came forward to... I had nothing but trouble. I had to earn the money for it. I have to admit, I rather resented it. I thought, Divine Mother, you're not being fair. But I found out that I was so much stronger as a result of doing it. It's finally for us that he does it. He gives us these tests in order that we can grow. We develop the strength. We develop the insight, the intuition, whatever it is. All of this is really a great blessing, well disguised. So when we have, for instance, here at Ananda, this is a very good example. You have people who really are friendly to people. They're friendly to others. They don't have a sense of animosity toward others. And as a result, somehow Ananda carries through. Somehow Ananda is succeeding. You'll find that this example is something that people begin to pick up on. In a culture where you are told from the cradle practically that nice guys finish last, and you're told from in all your schooling that you've got to compete. Why? There's something inside you that doesn't like it. I'll tell you an interesting thing that I discovered. Naturally, when you are a child, you have certain bullies go after you, and it's just a part of the growing up process. I was very strong, actually, for my size, and so I didn't have much of that. But there were a couple of men. When I weighed 100 pounds, Tommy Maters, who was 3 years older and weighed 230 pounds, decided he couldn't stand me. And I think the reason he couldn't stand me is that I just treated him perfectly normally. He wanted that kind of awed respect that little people used to give him. And so one time at the dining room table, I remember he was sort of trying to needle me. I was taking my soup this way. He said, "Don't you know you should take it that way, you peasant?" And he went on like this, and I just, okay. He said, "I'm gonna get you." And so I realized he was. And so when I went back to my room, I put the chest of drawers against the door and did everything I could. But he was a big and very strong man, 15 years old, but looked like a man. And he managed with a lot of huffing and puffing, and all the more angry afterward, once he burst into the room. And there was just nothing I could do. I just lay on the bed and let him pummel me as far as he could. I remember him panting and saying, "I want to throw you out the window." It was 3 floors down. It would not have been an easy landing. But I never did anything. I let him beat me. There was nothing I could do about it. You know what I noticed afterwards? He left me alone. Another time, there was a German Jew, Gunther Birkenau, in England. And I guess he'd had his share of being persecuted, so he had quite a chip on his shoulder. He too was a lot bigger than I. He was older than I. And he found me up in the hallway one time, and I was alone. We were alone. I was just coming out of the art room. And so I think the door must have nudged him or something, and he pushed me against the wall. And so I pushed him back. I knew that it was a hopeless cause, but I wasn't going to let him do that. I'm not going to be a coward. So as a result, he threw me on the floor and beat me. And I remember blood streaming down my face, and several upperclassmen came in. They were afraid of him too. Oh, a nice clean fight, and they left the room. So I never said, no, I give up. He said, give up? I said, no. So finally, he got tired of it all. He never touched me again. What you'll find is that if you stand up to bullies or people who are out to get you and so on, if you just remain calm, I didn't wish him any ill, but you'll find that sooner or later, you do win. I won in that case. Yeah, I had a bloody nose and was a little bruised for a while, but I won. He couldn't touch me again. There was another, but I never hit anybody or attacked anybody unless I had to. But there was this one boy in school who was not as strong as I, but he didn't know it because we were the same size. And so he looked at me one time. We were in the sick rooms, and he said, "You dirty foreigner." And I thought, well, maybe you're a dirty Englishman. Well, that was enough of an insult, and he leapt at my throat. And later I told my friends about it. As soon as they came to as I repeated my answer, "Maybe you're a dirty Englishman," they froze because they're very patriotic. Second World War was just about to erupt, you know. I said, well, all it meant was he hadn't had a bath, maybe. So then they relaxed. But this boy leapt at my throat, and I just held him down on the ground, and he was there spitting at me and couldn't get up because I was holding him. So finally, he just had to give up. Well, these things happen sometimes. You just can't help it. But the thing is that there has to be kindness in your heart, and you do end up finishing first. Look how many people have failed, and yet somehow we always hang in there. When Earthsong burned and it was destroyed by fire, any other health food store would have just gone bankrupt. We had a whole community behind it. We were able to hang in there long enough to rebuild it and start all over again and become a great success. Again and again, because we are many people, we're able to do what other people couldn't do if they were only Leela. Don't make me much. You'll see that I couldn't even finish lunch. I think I'm just not well. Yeah, so mashed potatoes might do it in soup. Okay. She cooks for me. And so the attitude of nonviolence is the thing that matters. Sri Yukteswar said that's what Patanjali was teaching, is to have the attitude of not wanting to harm anybody, helping them if you can. And you can do this if you feel that God is in everybody. There are times when you have to be very firm, but you don't have to be afraid, you don't have to be a coward, and you'll learn in the long run that with that attitude, as we have with SRF, they expected us to just roll over and die from the very beginning. And I don't think that they can even believe it now, that we're still in there, and we'll go on, and we don't mind having to, I mean, it's taken me a long time to be able to make some of the outright accusations against them that they have deserved for 12 years hard for me to do. Not because of me, but because of them. They're disciples of my guru. It's very painful to have to do that. But I don't flinch from it. It has to be. And I don't mind doing what we have to do as you all did, many of you down at the convocation, and yet it was a very friendly encounter. This sort of thing you need to do with regard to everything. Always think in terms of what's best for everybody. Don't think just what's in it for me. I had a very interesting experience one time in the Kali temple in Dakshineshwar in Bengal. And I had wanted to take photographs, but they said, no photographs of the Kali image in the temple. You can take photographs all around here, but don't take a picture of the Kali inside. Well, I was meditating where Master meditated in that story, The Heart of a Stone Image, you know, in the Autobiography of a Yogi. And then suddenly came the time for puja. And they had a couple of ropes, and nobody could come in between them, so that everybody had to be on the sides of those ropes. Well, that gave me a clear view of the Kali image. I thought, well, he said not to take a picture of the Kali in the temple, but I'm outside the temple. If she happens to come into the picture too, why not? And so I took a couple of flash pictures, and then I thought, well, I'm in trouble. But I sat there and meditated, and sure enough, a whole squadron of these officials came and ordered me to their office, and I said, well, the puja's still going on, let me meditate. And I was praying to Divine Mother, like, man, help me out. So anyway, finally they marched me to the office. A whole crowd of people, at least 100 of them, were following me. And this man was shouting. And I said, look, you sell that same image in the marketplace. That means it's not a question of devotion. I took it for devotees. I began with the argument that I took it outside. Yes, but you know why you took that particular picture. Well, I couldn't answer. Of course, that was why I took that particular picture. And so I just held my ground and said that it's not a matter of blasphemy. You sell it in the marketplace. It's not blasphemy. It's not money, because I'm only taking it to America to show to devotees. And finally, the crowd began to dwindle, and finally he started lamenting and saying, oh, you're going to cost me my job. Well, as soon as I heard him say that, then I said, oh, in that case, and I started to take the film out of the camera to give it to him, which is what he wanted. And he said, no, it's okay. Just give me a negative. I said, well, you know, slide pictures, you can't give people a negative. He said, just give me a negative. So I thought, well, the only thing I can do is take it to a photographer, have him make a negative. And so I told him I'd do that, but I made it clear that isn't what, he said it, he let it go. Several months later, a friend of mine was there at the Kali temple, and he heard this Swami talking to about 50 people. He heard him say, and he kept saying, it's not blasphemy. So I must have gone down in their annals, I don't know. But the thing is that as soon as I realized that his job was at stake, then I didn't want to do it. We must always have that thought, not just what's in it for me, but what's in it for other people, because they're a part of you too. As long as I didn't see any principle involved, I felt comfortable. But when it became a matter of harm to another person, why? You suffer without even knowing it if you hurt anybody, because they're a part of you. See, God has put us in this strange predicament of having an ego. And what makes it strange is that He's in everything. He made the whole show. But somehow He's given us that little germ of consciousness, which is self-consciousness. The ego is the soul identified with the body. And because we, with our energy moving outward always, our consciousness is always identified with what's outside, all the energy is flowing there, so we define ourselves in those terms. It takes a lot of spiritual effort to withdraw our energy and to understand that this life that is in this little body is the same life that's in everybody. But the more we have of that consciousness, the beautiful thing is, the more everything seems to go. Other people also want to help you. This is what Master showed us in his life, that wherever he went, he found friends. Wherever he went, he found people anxious to help him. Now you may think, And it makes sense, except that it doesn't happen. You may think that when you put out that attitude, you'll have no enemies. Patanjali said it, in fact, in his scripture, the Yoga Shastras, Yoga Sutras. And yet, we see that there were people not just willing to, but eager to crucify Christ. We see that all these great masters have in one way or another suffered enmity. There's the beautiful story of Haridas in Puri, he had been born a Muslim, but he became a convert to Krishna and became a devotee of Krishna. If I'm not mistaken, it may have been Chaitanya that brought him to Krishna. This I don't know. But he was a devotee of Krishna, and the king of Puri, the Raja, was a Muslim. And he was outraged that a Muslim should defect from their religion and become a Hindu. And he called him before his court, and ordered him. And he said, I can't. My heart belongs to Krishna. And finally, the Raja had to, according to his canon, condemn the man to death. So he had him strung up by his thumbs from a tree and had these executioners with big clubs beat him, the idea being to beat him until he died. And Haridas was, instead of feeling the pain in his own body, was feeling so much joy in the presence of Krishna in his heart that he prayed, God, let all these people feel your joy. And there was, of course, a crowd of people assembled there, Muslims, Hindus, everything. But the more he prayed for them, the more they were starting to dance in joy, so that the whole crowd was dancing and chanting the name of Krishna. And even these men who were supposed to kill him finally couldn't do it anymore, and they dropped their clubs and they were dancing, leaving poor Haridas up there. But the thing is that when you have this kind of attitude, you can't lose in the long run. If you get crucified, that's not the end. To be a victor in the eyes of God is what matters. To be a hero on the football field or on the field of battle or any other thing is such a passing thing. It doesn't really matter. Do you know who the main protagonists were in the First World War? I don't think many people do. I was reading in this same book about the Italians that Julius Caesar, what an excellent general he was. He outgeneraled everybody. Finally, as you know, his arrogance became just overwhelming and people finally murdered him. But that same man came back as Kaiser Wilhelm, who was the king of the Germans who initiated World War I. Master said he was Kaiser Wilhelm. I asked him, who was Roosevelt? He said, I've never told anybody. I was afraid I'd get into trouble. But it's interesting to consider that same warlike tendency after 2,000 years is still there. Who knows how long it'll take to get out of it. He said Stalin was Genghis Khan. Just as bad, if not worse, I don't know. Somebody, Master said that he'll suffer for 100,000 lives, 100,000 years for the bad karma he got in this life. And Debbie Mukherjee said, only 100,000 years? Master said, how long do you want a person to suffer? You think of eternity, and you think 1,000 years. Yeah, that's a pretty long time. It's nothing. Oh, 100,000 years? Okay. But you take it to 1,000,000. And then you multiply it by 1,000,000, and you've got 1 billion, or 1,000 is 1 billion in Europe, and it's 1 billion here. They call it a miliardo, is 1,000 million. But billion, zillion, these words mean nothing at all. You're still going to be around because you are eternal. You can't get away from it. Now, do you really think God, because you've done a few bad things, even very bad things, but a finite cause can't have an infinite result? And do you really think God's going to make you suffer all that time? I should think a few thousand years from now, in there, in hell, suffering, you're going to start wondering, what on earth is this all about? You won't remember. I mean, the reality of one life is just very small. So God is really very patient and loving, and we need to develop that attitude ourselves. And if you ever have the thought that, well, our rise is like a seesaw. If we rise, the other side goes down. You've got a lot to learn. We need to do something that will help both sides. This has been Ananda's philosophy, and it is very much the need of this world. That does not mean to be a coward. That does not mean to say that it's wrong to go to war if it's needed. You cannot just say, well, come right in and take everything. You can't do it. It would be fine for you personally, but you can't do it for everybody else. That would be taking their lives in your hands. That's not right. You have to do what's necessary, but you have to do it with kindness. And you'll notice that in that kindness, I've always loved a story about Master. This was when, towards the last of his life, and he came back from, he had bought a few canes and umbrellas. And he did this sort of, you know, as Ramakrishna, after he came out of ecstasy, he'd ask for a cigarette or a glass of water or something to bring his body down, his mind down to the body. And so Master had little collections. They really meant nothing to him. Yes, he used a cane, but one cane would do. No, it was more just sort of interesting himself in things just for the sake of keeping his mind down here. And because he was using money that had been given him as given to God, he bargained this man down. And he got the best bargain he possibly could for this umbrella, I believe it was. And after having done his duty as a representative of the organization and so on, then he started talking to the man and gave him much more money than he'd saved in the bargaining. And the man said, "You are a gentleman, sir," and he gave him a very fine umbrella. And Master, when he came home, I remember him saying, "What a shabby shop that man had. I think I'll buy him a new carpet." But that was his attitude, and that's what makes everybody want to work with you. Whereas if you beat them this time, you won't beat them the next time. There was a story, I think it was in a book by Vance Packard, but I'm not sure, where the graduating class of a business college was invited by the president of a large corporation to the top floor to get an idea of what it's like, what the view is like from the top, so to speak. And he asked them a hypothetical question. He said, "Now, supposing you have a man who supplies your company, and he relies on your order so much because they have been so big that he has no other customers. He's only supplying you. And supposing somebody comes and offers you a better price than he's offering, what should you do?" Well, I hope you would all answer, you'd do something to keep your loyal friend, wouldn't you? His answer was a shocker. He said, "Business is business. Get rid of him. Go where the bargains are." Well, what will happen? Probably the company that offered him the same deal at a discount, once he's driven the other fellow out of business, will raise his price. Why wouldn't he? That's the way they're thinking anyway. So would he really win in the long run? He might save $1 here, lose quite a few dollars later over here. Whereas if that man knows that you're loyal, he already has committed himself enough to have only you as a customer. If he knows that you give him that loyalty, won't it mean much more on even an economic level? It certainly will. You will gain in the long run, so that if there, for instance, is a depression, if your business is in trouble, he'll help you out. When people work together in this way, so much more is gained. Whereas, yes, the delusion that we're living in, this Maya, makes it seem, because the first time you win, the first time you act unscrupulous, you do tend to win. People don't expect it. They're not prepared. You can cut the rug out from under their feet and so on. But people soon get on to you. They soon see that's the way you are. They leave you in droves. You will find, even in the most cutthroat business, that loyalty pays, cooperation pays, kindness pays. I'll never forget, I think I told you this story recently but I never remember because I talked in Rhode Island, talked in Rome, talked in Assisi. Anyway, if you heard it from me before, don't tell me. But when I went to Europe in '55, there was a man in front of me with overweight, and the clerk at the counter there was saying, "I'm sorry, but you're going to have to pay overweight charges." And the man was very angry, and he probably had been expected to get away from it, and he had the manager come out and complain to him, and ended up spluttering and saying, "I'll never fly Pan Am again," and so on. Well, I was right behind him, and my worry was that I had a great deal more overweight than he did. And I didn't have money, really. I had a great allowance of $20 a month, but that's not enough to think about such things as that. My parents had sent me my ticket. They hadn't sent me a surcharge. And so I came up there sort of praying to Divine Mother and seeing this man as a manifestation of Divine Mother. And he saw all these things, harmonium and this thing and that thing, and he said, "Well, what have we got here?" "Oh, okay." Passed it right through. You'll see that these things work. It's just amazing how often when you show that kind of attitude, even strangers recognize you as a friend. Try not to wish harm to anybody. You will see that that is what this world needs more than anything else. And I think that one of the most important influences that these communities can have on the world is through kindness, through cooperation, through never wanting your own good at the expense of anybody else's, but recognizing that it's right. Whenever I bargain with people, which I do, especially in India, you just about have to, I always think of what's going to help him too. Because if you're only thinking of yourself, you lose in the long run. There's something unclean about it. So let this Memorial Day be a prayer for all those who die so uselessly in war. It's such an unnecessary expense. Good has come of war, no doubt. But what a terrible way to get it. How much better to be able to learn to live at peace with all. Try to pray, even for those people who have attacked us recently. Pray for them. That doesn't mean that all your love should go for them. Pray for us too. Pray that there be peace in this world. Not peace only because of cessation of war. Peace in the sense of goodwill toward all. Ahimsa toward all. Ahimsa finally, although the literal meaning is nonviolence, finally what it means is love toward all. You see, when you don't have any feeling of violence, love is there already. It comes out automatically. That's your true nature. The harm is not your true nature. So it isn't as if so much you had to develop kindness toward everybody. Cease to harm them and you automatically feel kind. Pray for them in that spirit. Okay.